every guy is in the same boat. Dating is rigged against men, at least for online dating apps. Even if you're only able to increase your looks from, say, a 5 to a 6, that is a big jump, and it can seriously yield a lot more success. And the second thing that I would absolutely say makes the second biggest difference is
if your whole life is shit, you've got no money, no social life, right? You don't care about your family, and you don't train, you don't work out, you feel sluggish and low every day, and you think a good relationship is going to solve that. It's going to solve like 1 to 2% of that. Hi guys, today I'm talking with Mr. Wheat Waffles. Wheat Waffles, welcome to the channel again. Are we using your first name or are we using your professional name?
still going to be using the professional name in this one.
Okay, Mr. Wheat Waffles is here with us. So there's a number of things that I've wanted to talk with you. We've had a lot of good discussions outside of these podcasts and on them. But the first thing that I wanted to talk to you about is, within your experience within the black pill space, is people possibly growing out of their black pill mentality? One thing I've noticed is that many young guys, myself included, had a sort of slightly catastrophic perspective on the world, which is that, you know, I feel lonely, I feel antisocial, and therefore that's the way it is, and that's the way it's always going to be. And in my case specifically, around the age of about 20, 21, I saw that it really didn't have to be that way. Now, I recognize that I am not representative of every young man's experience, but have you, in your experience, noticed yourself or people around you growing out of their slightly catastrophic belief that they're never going to be attractive or valued as a possible mate?
Well, I think there's a couple of things going on here with that question, and it is a good question. The one of the main misconceptions I think people have about the black pill, and that's not to say that this doesn't happen in any situation, because I've seen firsthand guys go down this path, is that you've pretty much got two options when you learn stuff about the black pill. And if we just assume that it is true, that what stuff in, my videos is true, the Tinder experiments, the data that shows that, looks are really important, especially so on dating apps, and that is going to be one of the main determinants of your dating life as a man. If we just assume all of that's true for a second, then I think that there's two options that, in a way, that you can take that information and data, is that you can either go, right, I'm going to have a really emotional reaction to this and be like, oh, I'm depressed, I'm going to be lonely forever. I think this is kind of alluding to that catastrophic vision that so many guys, young guys, have once they understand this material. So you can either have that really emotional reaction to it, and that could potentially be negative if you learn this data and then you don't do anything in your life to bounce back from it, just because the emotions are clouding your thoughts and actions for every single day of your life. You're never able to move on and do anything about it because you're just overshadowed by these negative thoughts, even though they may be true to some extent. And the other way that I think you can look at the data that I believe is true in the black pill is you look at it and you go, right, I understand that things are nowhere near as optimistic as I originally would have hoped. To some extent, I've been lied to by parents, teachers, friends who have told me that it's all about your personality. Those were all lies, and that's just the truth. I need to accept this now. But what can I actually do about it? What can I do moving forward, understanding that looks are so important as a guy? And I think the guys that take this path, they end up in a lot more of a positive trajectory. And I've seen so many emails, so many comments on my YouTube videos to confirm this, that guys that take this path are a lot more productive. And they honestly say, like, Weech, you've changed my life. I, was hopeless beforehand, but now I understand this information. I've taken proactive decisions in my life, such as looks maxing, such as, running the numbers game, because I know that if I'm in a niche, then it's just a matter of approaching a certain number of women until one of them finds my niche, my particular unique look attractive. Then now I've implemented all of those things into my life. I now have a girlfriend and things are going my way. And that never would have happened if I didn't stumble upon this material. Oh, wait.
We're back.
Yeah. I was finished speaking anyway, but it seemed that my camera disabled for a second. Strange. But anyway, yeah. What do you think?
Well, firstly, your camera just did a cool little zoom in effect, which is perfect. So that's fine. Yeah, no,
Good
that all
drama.
makes sense. I agree with you that it can be digested in multiple ways, right? Data can be digested in multiple ways. I think with age comes wisdom to some extent. The more you experience, the better your compass is for what you're going to experience in the future. The more you know what to expect from life. But do you feel like for those young guys, it's not so much a case of, some guys will take it the catastrophic way and some guys will take it, the positive, proactive way. Do you think that the fact that they're young guys, they're less experienced, they're less wise, means that they're also more likely to catastrophize as on account of their lack of experience in the world?
Well, it depends. I would actually say one of the biggest factors that determines somebody's angle that they go after discovering my videos or anyone else in this space's videos and data is that if they have had some experience dating, even if they've got zero actual experiences with women, like physical experiences and never had a girlfriend, but if they've at least dipped their toes in the water, they've tried downloading Tinder and got no success. They've cold approached at least 10 women, which is, pretty low numbers. If they've done that and then they've stumbled upon my videos, I would actually say that they have a lot more of a positive experience, and they're more likely to go in a positive trajectory after watching my content because I think what happens is, like, have you ever heard of the theory or quote, whatever it is, that unhappiness is equal to reality minus expectation? So if you've got a really lackluster, small reality, but the expectation was really, really high, then because you're subtracting one from the other, you're going to result in a really negative number. And the reason I think that guys will have a positive experience if they've tried dating after stumbling upon my videos is because it lowers their expectation drastically to understand, okay, yeah, guys are having a really, really hard time out there because women are extremely picky. And if, just as a simple example to put some words to what I'm describing, is that if somebody say stumbles upon my Tinder experiment of an average guy, or in many departments, he's actually above average. He's got a good job. He's 6'3". He's average looking in the face, no different from guys like me and you. And then they watch that video and they see that he was getting barely any results. He was getting no matches on Tinder. And then some guy watches that video and they think, oh, wow, I had no idea that Tinder was actually this rigged, that it is rigged against guys. And that first time when they originally downloaded Tinder and they were getting no matches, they might have been really depressed and upset about that. They might have thought, oh, I'm unwanted by women, things not going my way. I was sold this dream that it would change my life, but it's not. And then they see my video and then they realize, oh, every guy is in the same boat. Dating is rigged against men, at least for online dating apps. But now what else can I do about it? And so many people watch my Tinder experiments as the first video that they stumble upon from my channel because, it's got quite a broad outreach. And even if you have no interest in dating, a lot of guys have still downloaded Tinder once in their life. So they might be inclined to click on that video. And if they click on that video and they resonate with it and it changes their perspective at least a little bit, they're more likely to watch my other videos where I say, okay, dating is rigged. You've learned that so far, but now what can we actually do about it? How can we attack this problem in different routes, different avenues to actually do something about your dating life?
Right. Yeah, that all makes it makes a lot of sense. I mean, there's a couple of questions that come up. The first one is earlier on you mentioned that some of these guys they actually end up, getting a girlfriend and getting some success when they become proactive after, learning the truth and reading the data that very often you are giving them. What constitutes success there? Is it that they lower their standards of what's an acceptable partner for them and end up happy with less than what they imagined? Or is it that they are actually able to achieve more or achieve what they originally wanted in terms of standards of beauty or partner quality, let's say? What is that
I think that
success?
I don't think it's a matter of lowering standards. I think that the first step is an acceptance of just how hard dating is as an average guy. However, it's not impossible, but the demands are so high and hard to accomplish. The barriers to entry are difficult, but if you are able to up your level of effort and um, work, all synonyms here, then you are able to overcome this hard challenge. Like, I think it's a little bit of a human psychology at play here, because if you was told that there's this task to do, which is really, really easy, and then you go to do the task, and then you find out actually it's really, really hard, then what are you more likely to do in that scenario?
So if you thought it was
Just,
easy and then you
yeah,
realize it's hard,
just as like a two-word answer, what are you more
yeah,
likely to
give
do?
up, right?
Yeah, give up. Give up. If you're told that it's really easy and it turns out to be really hard, then you're going to give up. However, if somebody stumbles upon my videos and they realize that dating is really, really, really hard and rigged against men, whilst women have it significantly easy, however, as a man, you can still attack dating at other angles to still come out on top. Then if you go into dating with that knowledge that it is extremely difficult as a guy, then I think that that's the first step to then think, okay, it is hard, but the rewards that are potentially lying to me at the end of it are massive because this is where, if you're successful, you can either have a super abundant dating life, either having lots of short-term commitments with women and, a lot of flings, blah, blah, blah. Or you find the girl of your dreams who's high quality, beautiful, has all of these other good things going about her, and then you're going to have a beautiful family later on down the line, kids and stuff. You know, the rewards are higher, but I think that accepting that the difficulty is higher at the start is how you're able to justify putting in the work to get those rewards.
Yeah, that makes sense. I suppose just to give a sort of devil's advocate argument to that, I think I hadn't heard anything about the black pill when I was 20, 21 years old. I don't think it existed, at least not in the public forum. I'm not sure, it's hard for me to say, sort of post hoc, how I would have responded to that type of information. But certainly before I found, you know, pickup artists really and dating coaches that were going out and approaching, I'm quite glad that I didn't find information that told me how impossible it was going to be for someone like me, because I believed myself not to be very attractive. So do you think there is a sort of a worthy counter argument there? And how do you sort of weigh up those two? I suppose to summarize the difference between, as you said, having realistic expectations and so being more satisfied when you're able to achieve your realistic expectations versus I suppose having your expectations lowered such that you're not even really going for what you want, or maybe you think that what you did want is impossible, so you don't shoot for the stars and fall on the moon, right? You don't
Yeah.
shoot to the top and then fall somewhere in between. You
Well,
shoot lower and fall lower.
yeah. Some guys absolutely go down the path that you just described. And you might self-proclaim if you was able to rewind time, if you was exposed to my videos or anyone else in MySpace's videos, that could have been like a negative confidence boost. Like, it would have decreased your confidence. And there's absolutely guys that go down that path, but it's not the message that I want to send out in my videos. I am absolutely about positivity, but that requires you to have a realistic outlook and expectations from the get-go. But there's a whole community of the guys that you just described, and it's not my community, but it's semi-related, I guess, in some kind of way. Have you heard of I'm going to say the YouTube friendly way of saying it, because I know that it's a blacklisted word. You probably know what I'm referring to. The MTOW movement. I've
Mm-hmm.
removed the letter to ensure that it's YouTube friendly because I know that it's a blacklisted word. But have you heard of the MTOW community?
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And that these are a group of guys who it sounds like it's exactly that you described. They have been told that dating is really hard, it's rigged against men, and not just dating, but a whole host of different things. Like the workplace is rigged against men. You're going to get accused of harassment left, right, and center. HR is going to be on your case, and marriage is against men. Child custody is against men, and the whole world is against men. And whether these things are true or not, I think a lot of them are exaggerations, and I don't agree with that. But some of the stuff that they talk about is absolutely true with regard to child custody and stuff. Um, but these are the guys that it seems it's more in alignment with what you described, that they are told all of these negative, dire things about dating and the world, and then it takes so much of a toll on them that they say, okay, I'm quitting, I'm out altogether. And I think that there would be a large portion of guys who are in that community where if they didn't discover those videos, and especially the exaggerated ones, which has a really pessimistic view of the world, which is simply not true, then if they didn't discover that content and they had a more positive mindset, then they would actually be more likely to be on a path where they could meet the girl of their dreams or have the dating life that they want.
Yeah, that makes sense. So I guess the obvious question in everybody's minds is going to be, well, what, in your opinion, differentiates those that respond proactively and those that respond dismally to the data that you offer?
Yeah, well, one of the points that I already brought up, but I think I only half finished it earlier in the conversation, is whether a guy has actually dipped their toes in the water first before watching these videos. Because if I'm honest, if a guy has never even approached a girl in his life and he's never been on dating apps, then I don't see what benefit he could possibly get over watching one of my videos, even though it might be true. However, my fear is that that guy might end up being so pushed down with a bleak view. And it's not to say it's negative because I think it's truthful. However, if you at least go into dating initially with rose tinted glasses, slightly rose tinted glasses, you've dipped your toes in the water and you realize it's much more difficult than you initially would have thought. But then you watch my videos and then you're able to bounce back even stronger. I think if you have a negative view initially and you don't go through that rose tinted phase, then you're more likely to opt out altogether and never take action. And you're more likely to sit at home just watching videos all day about how rigged it is against you without actual life experience to back that up.
Yeah, okay. So that's actually practical then, because if we're going to order it in a sort of list format, it's like step one. I mean, it's almost the scientific method. Step one, have whatever hypotheses you have at the start, right? You don't have to have an answer. Step two, test it in the real world, right? Step
Yeah.
three, evaluate the results that you're getting against the data, right? And against what other people have done. And it's interesting because it bleeds into research into chess. And they looked at people who started playing chess where they had no idea what they were doing, right? They knew what the pieces were and sort of how to play. They had no idea about, starting theory, like the first moves and what are the best moves to make, versus people who understood the theory of where to move first. And I guess to how deep that rabbit hole goes of chess and how advanced it gets. And the results after 3 or 4 months of playing were better for people who played at the start without knowing anything than for those that had, I suppose, a slightly dismal view because they're like, oh, it's going to take me 10 years to even get to master level and then another 5 years to get to international master, and 99.9% give up playing before they ever get to X Elo rating. So yeah, I suppose that suggests that the first thing to do is to go out and play, to go out and see what's true of you right now in the experiential world before looking at data and watching videos and getting help.
Yeah, yeah, to at least build your own perspective a little bit, so you're not just being force-fed what some other guy who makes videos in his house is saying. I think that definitely is a good way of going about it.
Great. Okay. Well, that's, I think, purely practical. So, to anyone who's listening to this who hasn't gone out and tested it in the real world, pause the video, go out, do an approach, come back, and you can hear the rest of the conversation. Okay. So, I just want to quickly go back to the idea of growing out of it. And maybe as far as you're willing to talk about it, it seems to me like you've had somewhat of a coming of age in terms of just becoming a more attractive guy with age. And I suppose that's not true of every guy. But being in the position you're in and maybe recognizing that you have become more good looking or more valuable in the eyes of a potential partner, have your, I don't want to say views because we've been talking about data, right? So I know I understand that what we're talking about is data, but has your perspective right, on that data changed
Hmm.
as you have changed personally?
Yeah, I was actually going to say I don't have a problem with the word views because even though there is data, I think you can only ever have interpretations from that data, and they're going to vary differently. And it's how you respond to that data ultimately, which is your perspective and interpretation.
Sure.
Um, if I'm honest, my views like haven't changed more or less in any way. I wish I could say that they could. I'm guessing that's more of like the positive answer to say like, oh yeah, I'm a changed man now and I've changed my mind and all of this stuff. That's not how it is. No, I still very much believe the same things that I did a few years ago. However, the difference is now I have the experience that sort of reinforces what I have experienced. And just to give like a couple of examples for that, because say a few years ago when I was having no success, I was getting no matches on Tinder, then, I knew that that was what should have happened because I knew that I wasn't like a really attractive guy and my pictures were terrible and stuff like that. But then once I was able to create Tinder experiments of my own and get good photos, I was able to pinpoint more specifically. It's almost as if have you ever heard of the difference between like accuracy and precision? That um precision is I think that precision is having data points that are close together, and then accuracy is having data points that are around the right answer. And I think that my accuracy was always pinpoint, that I was always on the money. I always had the right answer, but the data points were like kind of spread out and they weren't close to the center.
Mm.
But after I was able to have some experiences dating success, then I was able to increase the precision and really narrow down what works, what doesn't, and how you can adapt your own circumstances in order to increase your success. Does that kind of make sense? So what I'm trying to say is like the macro was always true, that I knew that looks mattered, that it was mainly about your height and face. And that is like the center of the dartboard, basically. That's the bullseye. However, like, my data points were kind of all like spread around that and they weren't close together. But once I had experiences, I was able to like join things closer together and move those data points closer to build a more accurate model.
Yeah, no, that
I've got
makes
no
a lot
idea
of
if that made sense or
no,
not, but
it makes a lot of sense to me. I interpret that as a sort of jigsaw puzzle, and like starting from the corners versus starting from the middle. And if you cluster in the middle a few together, that's maybe a more precise way of starting. But actually, the most accurate way to do it is by having four separate points in the corners and working your way along the border and inside. So I think for me, that's how I interpret it, as being accuracy is like you're right fundamentally, or at least in your convictions. Your convictions are consistent across time up until now. However, before you were in all corners, but yeah, before you weren't specifically pulling all of those ideas from uh, all of the right places, but you were on the money in elementally about what was the
yeah,
center. So
yeah,
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 that makes sense. That makes
exactly.
sense to me. Um, okay. So that all makes sense. I guess that again, I'm trying to put myself in the listener's shoes and think, okay, well, so what is X? What is Y? What are those factors then? I believe that there's a little bit of distance between you and I on how we interpret that data and probably the extent to which we put looks at the center, although I think we're more similar than we are different. So I believe there probably is some distance there. However, what do you believe are those relevant controllable factors that a man can change and utilize and optimize, given that looks and face has such an important
Hmm.
bearing?
I would absolutely say that the biggest two are increasing your looks in the ways that you can control. Because even though you are limited in, quite a strong regard, like you can't change your facial structure, you can't change your height, you can trim around the edges. And because looks is just so, so important, that those trimming around the edges can make a little bit of a difference. And I've sometimes compared the look scale to like a Richter scale, that even if you're only able to increase your looks from, say, a 5 to a 6, and that might be the difference of having the right haircut, growing the right beard and getting it trimmed correctly, getting tailored clothes that look good. Like that might only bump you up from a 5 to a 6. However, at least from what I've seen, that is a big, big jump, and it can seriously yield a lot more success, significantly more choosing signals, and things go in the right direction for you when you're talking to a woman. And the second thing that I would absolutely say makes the second biggest difference is social skills. Like, forget money, forget all of these other things. I think that social skills absolutely is the second changeable thing that you can do to improve your dating life. If you don't have the social skills, then it's just really, really difficult. And just to throw in like a third thing, which I think kind of ties in, I would say volume comes after that. If you're not putting in the approaches, like if you have 10 times more volume, provided that you're like a 6 out of 10 guy with above average social skills, you should get 10 times more results from that increase in volume.
Makes sense. That's very, very interesting. I don't think many people, well, possibly your disciples, but I'm sure people who only know your name, on chance hearing, for example, or a little bit about you, would not think that you put such a weight on social skills. So this isn't a leading question in any way. I'm genuinely curious from your perspective as someone who, as far as our conversations has gone, you haven't been like really deep into the sort of cold approach day game region, at least not, I mean, to the level that a lot of guys have. So, in your opinion, in terms of improving social skills, what would you prescribe? I know you don't tend to prescribe, but what would you prescribe as the best way to actually improve social skills?
I would say, and this is going to sound like an answer that not many people have heard before, but I absolutely think it's true and incredibly overlooked in the pickup community or any social, you know, secrets and teachings. You know what I'm trying to say, is in like
Mm-hmm.
charisma building channels, stuff like that. It's an incredibly overlooked part of social skills. And I'm going to say accent and voice in general, having the right pitch, the right speed of speech, having the right tone and the right accent goes such a long way. I've seen in my personal life that if you, for example, there's some cold approach videos floating around on TikTok, and there's this one guy who I've seen, and all of the comments like make a complete joke of him. And surprisingly, I actually disagree with those comments to some degree, even though it's not what you would anticipate, because no one's ever seen this guy's face who does cold approach, and he's absolutely terrible about at it. He's got over 100 videos, and he's never had success. Like at best, he would get a number that you know is going to flake, and the girl is just trying to get rid of him. And all of the comments are just saying, "Bro, we need a face reveal. We need to actually see how ugly you are. We need to see why it's working so bad for you." And that might be true to some extent, that I don't think he would be the best looking guy. He's definitely not going to be some 6'4" Chad. But I can see a possibility where he's just average or maybe a tiny bit below average. That's not to say that it's not out of the question that he could also be extremely ugly. However, I can still see a possibility where he is average, but the main thing that I think brings him down is the fact that his accent, it's a roadman accent. He goes up to girls and he's like, "Hey, gorgeous, I thought you was well pretty, you know. I just saw you from over there." And he might say it with confidence, he might say it with conviction, he might say it, with good depth to his voice, but because his accent is that of a roadman, and he's approaching like middle class girls who have a more posh voice, then they are immediately creeped out by him, and they think that he's like some lower status guy who's harassing them. Like that's the honest vibe that I get. And I don't think it would necessarily be a matter of his looks. It could be, that could be an extra factor, but his accent, honestly, I believe is a huge component of why he's getting rejected.
That's interesting. I haven't thought too deeply about accent maxing, but
Mhm.
I can definitely see that. I have read some studies where which sort of fly in the face of hypergamy to some extent, because they show that it's not so much women will tend towards a higher class accent, they will tend towards a similar accent, right? So people tend to, of course, hypergamy exists, but people will tend to go for those who have shared experiences or a similar background to them, and then possibly enact hypergamy within that, right? So
Yes.
it might be that the contrast was so great with his roadman accent and the middle class nature of the woman he was approaching, but maybe it wouldn't have been so severe had he been approaching women of his, like, let's say, I don't want to say economic, but socio background, social
Yes, I,
background.
I would I would tweak what I said a little bit, and I agree. I think that, and I've even seen this in the evidence of his videos, that if he approaches a woman who is a little bit more on the chavvy side, and her accent isn't as roadman-y as his, but it's still, you can tell a little bit more lower socioeconomic status. And if she's like smoking, if she's wearing a certain style of clothes, which is associated with, lower socioeconomic backgrounds, then I see that more leading to better responses from the girls that he's had in those interactions. But as soon as he approaches a middle class girl, like you see the, I'm gonna say fear. I've honestly seen approaches that he's had where he goes up to a middle class girl, and the girl is immediately thinking, "This guy needs to step away from me. He's being weird. He's being creepy. He's not on my socioeconomic level. I wish that he disappears." Essentially,
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's possibly true. I mean, I think I've got a, it's probably on the higher, like social at least, end of the spectrum as far as British accents go. But I've found the same is true for me, where I will tend to get much better responses from middle class women than I would from women who have a very obviously different accent to me. I think part of it is sort of access, right? It's the sense that that accent is so different, I cannot relate to the world he's in. And so immediately there is a barrier, right? Whereas at least if the accent's similar, it sounds like their dad or their brother or the people they grew up with, there's almost a sense that you're in the same tribe on a macro level. You're in the
yes.
same, you might have mutual friends, you might have commonalities. There's a safety element going on there, I think, that separates maybe different accent brackets, if you will.
Yeah, yeah, I definitely agree with that.
Cool. Okay, so I guess the final thing specifically on the black pill that I want to dig into is look standards. I mean, it's been a big question for me over the past few years about, well, okay, we're so focused on like having the best lives that we can and optimizing our circumstances and going for the most beautiful woman we can get. But there doesn't seem to be much correlation between quality of life, well-being, happiness, and partner quality in terms of looks alone. So, what would you ever recommend people, let's say young men who are maybe in the black pill, catastrophic black pill mindset, or maybe even the proactive black pill mindset, to just simply stop valuing looks as much as they do and just saying like, why do you care so much how
As in,
attractive she
looks
is?
about themselves or looks
No, as
about.
sorry, looks about a potential partner, right?
Okay.
Maybe go into that, and
Right.
I know where I know where I think you're going to go, and I sort of have a clarification lined up, but go ahead.
Fair enough. Well, I think it's very difficult for men to change what they value in a potential partner. And I think society has always said and told young guys growing up that your guys, you care about looks, and that makes complete sense because men, they're just thirsty people and they just care about the beauty of the woman and not much else. Both young men and young women are told that men just value looks. And that aligns with the reality that a lot of guys have growing up. They, would talk amongst their peers or they would have crushes on girls, and they're going to have crushes on the girls that are more attractive. They're going to be like, "Oh, I would do anything to make that girl my girlfriend, even though I hardly know her at this point. I would love to get to know her a little bit better." So guys confirm thoughts and their own conversations with other guys that looks are extremely important. And I think it's very difficult for a guy to change that because attraction is mainly a fixed thing. You can't rewire your brain that much to change what you value in a partner. But you might have logical arguments to think like, oh, looks will fade and personality prevails at the end of the day, blah, blah, blah. But if your brain's not thinking that, you're not going to be able to tune into, say, your sex life in order to justify like, oh, I'm sleeping with this really unattractive woman, but that's okay because her personality is great. And like you're not going to be able to communicate to your dick in order to, still get the job done, if that makes sense. However, the light, I think I've wrapped up that point pretty well. I was going to say something else, but I'll let you respond to that first.
Sure. So completely agreed. Yeah, obviously, we're in agreement that you cannot decide how you feel at any one time, right? It's why just be happy, right? Just be positive is just never good advice because if it's almost insulting to the person that's unhappy to be told just be happy, right? Or to the guy that can't approach, just approach. It's insulting because it assumes that they haven't had the intellect to get there by themselves, and they needed you to tell them that it was that easy. So I understand that you cannot change your biology, your psychology, and I guess we're going a little bit onto a deeper level here. But I guess what I'm hinting towards is that, as you mentioned, it's very, very difficult to persuade yourself that you're attracted to someone who isn't making you feel arousal, the felt experience of arousal. But we do have the autonomy to make decisions, let's say. Do you think that these guys could say, right, well, my reality is that I am this way, I make this much money, I'm this tall, I look like this, my social skills are this good, my economic background is this. Therefore, I'm going to decide that I can be happy with a woman who didn't fit all of my looks criteria that I had when I was reading FHM mags at 11 years old and watching porn from 13. Is it not to their benefit to maybe make an executive decision, which they do have control over, to say, even though I don't feel as aroused by this woman as I did by that woman, I'm going to decide to be I bring my mind with me. I'm going to decide that this is what I'm going for, that this is what I want.
Yeah, I think that's actually quite natural in guys. And it makes me think that arousal is a little bit more plastic than people may think. But what I'm trying to pinpoint here is that arousal usually correlates with what kind of girl you think that is on the same level as you in terms of all of the different boxes combined. Because like the girls that I, always find attractive are the ones that I think are on my level or above, and anyone who's beneath my level, I don't deem as attractive. And is that because I was born that way and I'm hardwired like that it just so happens that the girls on my level or above are the ones that I deem attractive? Or is that because there's some natural system in my mind that adapts and changes based on, my own feedback from my own dating life and thinking, okay, like, I believe that I'm this valuable as a guy. And this is all in between the lines. Like I'm not actually thinking these thoughts, but this is subconscious, and it's able to branch across and look at the women available and go, okay, these women are roughly on my level. Do you kind of see what I'm saying? Because the only reason I think that this could be true is that when you look at like really, really, really unattractive guys, like bottom 10 percenters, in the occasional times that they are able to get a relationship with a woman, like I've seen so many examples where I couldn't even fathom or dream of being aroused by that particular woman because, we're just talking extremely unattractive features. Usually obesity is a main one. Like you know what I'm trying to allude here. Like I'm
Yeah.
thinking of like the stereotypical UK or American couple where both partners are extremely obese. And, I just find it a little bit difficult. And it's logical to believe that they have been aroused by each other by the very fact that they've got kids. So you know that the deed was done sometime in the past. That's just
Mm.
putting two and two together. So, if I'm just trying to say, like, if I was in that guy's shoes, I think that the subconscious part of me would be thinking, oh, this woman is on my level. She is the same looks as me. Therefore, I'm aroused by that. That's not a conscious decision, but it's like the natural way that the brain adjusts.
That's very interesting. So maybe it's not on a genetic level, it's on a behavioral level that we adapt our standards of what's beautiful to the circumstance that we find ourselves in. And there is a sort of like cause effect symbiosis there, where like the cause of going from being a 5 to a 7 out of 10 in looks, let's say, means that your access to women goes from like a 4 to a 6 in general terms, and therefore your mind adapts what it is fundamentally attracted to the new position that you find yourself in.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I've even seen evidence on the opposite side of the spectrum as well. Like, there's like this 8 out of 10 guy that I speak to. I've like, had consultations with him and stuff like that. And he's got the stereotypical Chad dating life that he's been able to like invite women over to his place straight away, get things on. And these aren't like 8 out of 10 women themselves. They're typically fives or sixes. And he said in some of those scenarios, like he's rejected them there and there, like when they've showed up. And I think most guys who were like fives or sixes, they would absolutely love to be in that scenario. They would love to, have those options with those girls, and they would happily have a new five or six showing up at their door every other night. However, for this guy, it seems that his, in between the lines wavelength, brain stuff that I'm talking about has adjusted to the point where he's now only attracted to other eights, maybe sevens. Do you kind of see what I mean?
Yeah, I do. I do. Um, it all makes a lot of sense. I I think we're yeah. There's definitely two different strands here, because I think one thing that people, and particularly young men, as we're talking about, fail to do is to extrapolate dating opportunities with overall happiness and well-being. And it's sort of this mess of like, if I am, they receive the black pill information and they're like, if I am ugly and therefore I'm a 3 and so I can only get a 1, right? Or a 4 out of 10 looks, I can only get a 2. Then obviously my dating pool is not ideal by any stretch of the imagination. Therefore, my entire sense of well-being is limited in this to the same extent that my dating opportunities are, right? And I think for loads of men, even if they deny it, especially young men like early mid 20s, there is this sense that there is no distance between the quality of the partner we're able to attain in terms of looks only, let's say, and the quality of our overall life and well-being, right? And I think what I'm trying to do these days and these years is like extrapolate the two and say, don't minimize your quality of life and your potential for well-being so narrowly down to like the physical appearance of the woman that you choose to raise a family with, or you choose to enjoy spending time with in whatever way. um, do you agree with that? And do you think there is any there's any like there's anything there that should or can be pushed to men who would value that?
Well, I don't necessarily think that they're mutually exclusive. Like if I was some guy who identifies himself as a 5 out of 10 and I was looking for a partner, I would want both the romantic life qualities, all of the good things that you've spoken about, and I would want to deem her attractive. I would want the best of both. And I don't see why that I couldn't achieve both, especially because what I'm asking for is what my value is as a guy. Do you know what I'm saying?
Hmm.
Yeah.
I understand what you're saying. It's just that I guess the real question is, why look for that, right? So for example, let's say I said, oh, I've only got so much money and therefore I can't afford like this huge burger. I can only afford this little burger. Well, the rational next question would be, yeah, but why am I putting so much value on having more like not healthy food rather than less not healthy food? Am I placing uh, uh, my obsession with getting the big burger? Could that obsession, should that be placed like prioritized better? right? And with the obviously with this case, it's like, yes, I'm attracted to more beautiful women, but if I put so much of my focus as a man on that my well-being is only good when I've got a beautiful woman, like, why is that even important? I guess the first principal question, other than just blind desire, which is an emotion and a felt sense, isn't that slightly misplaced?
Um, I think I'm trying to think of another thing to say, which isn't already repeating what I've already said, because I was just about to go down the route of, if a guy feels a certain way and his brain is hardwired in a way that
Yeah.
he really wants an attractive woman, then, he can't, he's very limited in his sense of changing that. But what I think he can change is, and I think you was kind of alluding to this, is how much value, investment, and time, energy, all of the resources he's willing to put on this thing that could potentially bring joy to his life. So, just taking an example, if you're a man who is extremely unattractive and you know that the best you would likely be able to get in the dating market is a woman that you simply don't have any desire for, you deem extremely unattractive, then you can't necessarily change, that outcome if you was able to put in the work approaches, yada yada yada. However, you could change your mindset of, okay, how important is this actually for me? And you can diminish how important it is to like have a fulfilling dating life. So, you know, some advice I have to say I've given out myself a few times before. If a guy is extremely unattractive, and this is less than 5% of guys, but if they just are, God forbid, extremely unattractive, then I just say, I'm sorry, mate, but you're probably gonna find better opportunities for happiness elsewhere outside of dating. I just can't see how you'd be able to find a partner that you would find attractive unless you're, the other thing that I said about that your view of attraction would adjust depending on your own value, but not every guy would be like that. And if there is a guy who's like a 2 out of 10 or a 3 out of 10, and he finds out that the best he could get is a 3 or 2, then in the best case scenario, then if I was in his shoes, all I could say is I think I would find happiness in other departments of life. I would find some other hobby. I would find something else to do to occupy my time. I would diminish the dating aspect of how much value and pride it brings to my life to a minimal.
Yeah, I mean, I don't even think that's in any way controversial or like something to hesitate on giving. I give that advice to virtually everyone, regardless of their looks and their status and everything else, which is that if you're coming into this, as you said, men are thirsty by nature. If you're coming into this and thinking that your entire sense of well-being, your entire possible input into the world and impact on the world is condensed into how physically attractive, how symmetrical is the face of the woman that you're going to put a baby in one day, then you've got an incredibly limited and shallow view of life. And I think
I,
that's one
I
of
don't
the
know. I'm
great.
going to give you a little bit of pushback on that because I think from an evolution point of view, it does make sense, and you can understand why so many men, and not just men, but women as well, like have this, such great view of how important their future partner's beauty and quality, all different aspects is. And because ultimately, from an evolutionary perspective, we are on this earth to reproduce. That is like what we have been programmed to do. And because of that, I think it's inescapable that guys would have imprinted in their minds that, yeah, this is really important. The partner that you end up with, that's gonna largely dictate how successful your children will be in the reproduction market again when you eventually have kids.
Yeah, I guess I agree with that to some extent. Again, I would push back and say I think the distinction that we have as humans, I can't speak for other animals, but as humans, I think it's obvious that we've evolved to a state where we can have these questions and we can ask these questions. And whether or not we've evolved through biological processes to arrive in a place where you and I can have this conversation about what is fundamentally important to us, I would argue that the same impulse towards sugar is true. we've evolved to be seeking out sugary foods because sugar was so rare in our evolutionary history. We'd have to stumble upon a honey pot or a fruit tree, or we just wouldn't have sugar and salt. The same with the ocean and deep rocks for salt. But the fact that we are biologically programmed to seek out sugar and salt doesn't mean that our fundamental well-being and the well-being of the world around us is predicated on our access to sugar and salt. Those are things that fortunately we can say, yes, I biologically want sugar, and yet I'm not going to eat it because I know that everything is better when I don't. Like I sort of see like sexual impulse on the same level as sugar. We've evolved by a process of evolution, and therefore it's in our genetics to want to continue that of evolution. But to think that our life and the impact we can have is limited to just the sexual impulse is forgetting the fact that we're literally sat here discussing it, and we've
Yeah, of
evolved to the point
course.
where we can.
Yeah, I think that the human brain is an incredibly powerful thing, and it's so powerful that you can change your views, which can sometimes even push back against like evolution, just because like the human brain is just so advanced. But at the same time, like, based on all of these arguments that you just made, it makes me think like, okay, but still, why are there people that are lonely in the world? Why do people feel loneliness? Why do people feel, not a sense of well-being? And I think that it stems back to evolution. And, not just to try and put you in a corner, but, it seems that what you would eventually lead on to say to those people that are feeling loneliness is like, okay, the reason you're feeling lonely is because you don't have someone, but then just devalue the impact on your well-being of having someone. Just devalue it so much to the point until the loneliness goes away. Do you know what I'm talking about? But I think that's a lot easier said than done.
No, I completely agree with that. And again, I'm not going to diminish the value of having a healthy, good quality partner, however we want to vaguely define that. I'm not going to diminish it beyond the point at which I believe it stands in reality. But what I would say to those guys is like, if your whole life is shit, you've got no money, you've got no potential to, you've got no opportunities career wise ahead of you right now. You have no close friends around you, right? And the most common answer for under 21s in America, males, to how many friends do you have? The most common, i.e. The what's it called?
Mode,
The mode number
mode.
is zero friends, right? So if you've got no social life, right? You don't care about your family, you don't look after your family, you don't have the money to support your family even if they need it. You have no friends, and you don't train, you don't work out, you feel sluggish and low every day, and you think a good relationship is going to solve that. It's going to solve like 1 to 2% of that. There is this
Mm.
symbiosis between when you start attacking all relevant areas of your life together. You start going to the gym that one time, you breathe, you meditate properly, you sleep well, you start generating really good quality friendships, deep friendships with other guys. You start going out and cold approaching, right? All of that together, then your life starts to very rapidly improve. But I don't think to that lonely person, in fact, the first advice I ever give them, the first advice I give them is never to focus on their dating life, right? It's to get a picture of their wealth, health, and love. There's a symbiosis between those three, and start mapping it out. Where are you on a 1 to 10 with your current finances and your opportunities to create wealth? Where are you right now with your health, physical, emotional, and spiritual? And where are you with your love, family, friends, and relationships? Right? And if we look at it from that perspective, relationships is 1 in 8, 1/8. So it's roughly 12% if we're going to give them equal value. Now, I do believe it has higher value than, on average than the others. As you said, there are certain biological necessities there. But I absolutely wouldn't recommend that guy who's miserable and lonely to just like find a partner. I would say, well, like start with your friendships, start with this like balance across the relevant areas, because I think it's a tragedy if that person with a shitty life focuses on the one thing that's absolutely out of their reach right now. They should focus on whatever's in their reach.
Yeah, yeah, I absolutely agree with that. And I guess what you're saying almost lends itself to the meme. And I despise anyone who watches my content and has this attitude that like, a guy who's extremely overweight, like has lived in his mum's basement his whole life, and his only hobby is playing World of Warcraft, and he doesn't have any social life or anything like that. But then even if he's hyping me up in my own comment section and saying like, oh yeah, dating is so bad, like, these women, they're delusional and their standards are too high. Like, if he's saying that, it's almost like goes back to what Jesus said: whoever didn't commit the first sin can cast the first stone. That I just think, what a sad person. I despise that you're even watching my videos. You've got a mountain to climb. You've got a million other things that you could be doing. And these people are usually depressed. They've got other things in their life that are making them sad. And they think it, and then they straw man it to say, oh, it's because of women's standards. It's because my dating life isn't going the direction I want. But they don't realize that they've actually got 100 other things that they could be doing to increase their well-being and happiness. And most of them are the aspects of life that you described.
Yeah, 100% agreed. The only caveat to that is that I kind of know what it's like to some extent. Like, at least I know what it's like to be physically completely in control of the well-being of my life, but to have somehow watched it all get out of control such that even leaving the house feels like a huge effort, and what's the point anyway? So yeah, I guess there is, I mean, my solution, maybe we can tie this up with my solution and then your solution. But my solution to that is to sort of take a leaf out of the CBT book, which I don't always do, but I think there are some very good ones, which is like to basically, they have a thing called graded exposure, which is supposed to help people with phobias overcome that phobia. So if you have a phobia of heights, they would say, right, yeah, you can't get to the top of that building and stand and look over the edge. That's going to be terrifying. But what about if you go to the first floor? And the guy's like, yeah, I can go to the first floor. Okay, what about the second floor? Yeah, okay. What about the third? No, that's too high. Okay, so then get halfway up the stairs. Now, what about three-quarters of the way up? And they basically, I mean, it doesn't need a CBT terminology. It's so fucking obvious. It's basically just do the next thing that you can do in order to move towards the goal. But for me, it would my advice to make it practical for those guys if they are in that position is like literally, what can you do? Think of the thing that's too hard for you to do, approach a woman, and then minimize it to something even smaller. What about leaving the house? Fine. What about looking at someone in the eyes? Right? Maybe that's your next task, and it can be incredibly practical when we just figure out what's the hardest thing that we definitely can do right now, and that is graded exposure. And
Yeah,
maybe,
I think
yeah, you're
I think that is a good solution because like say when it comes to cold approach, relating this to your content, I'm sure you get a lot of clients who just have so much anxiety, fear of like approaching a woman. So then if you think of like baby steps, okay, how about, because a direct approach might be extremely fearful for a lot of guys. They might think, oh, if I go over to a woman and tell her that I thought she was attractive, that would be terrifying for me. So then what if you send him over and say, oh, just go over and say hi and just ask her about her day? And if that's still too terrifying, then, because it just seems like you're a time waster, then just go over to her and say, oh, I thought you looked like somebody I knew, but you're not. And then he can just walk away straight away. It's just about lowering the barriers to entry, like you say, that you're just going up one stair at a time to get to the goal eventually.
100%, 100%. And the interesting thing is that when presented with that, I've had clients in the past where I've given them that and we've got on the call, and it's not my long-term clients, but guys that I worked with on a short term, and I'll say like, well, how did it go? And they say like, no, I still didn't hit my goal, my target. I'll say, okay, well, where did you get up to on the graded exposure? And they're like, oh, around number three. I'm like, you didn't even look at it, did you? And they're like, no, I didn't. Can't, like, what can you do, right? But the good thing about a system or a process like this is it forces you to look at yourself and say, well, if I'm not doing it when I've been given a step-by-step clear instructions of what I definitely can do, then I actually do not want it. I actually
Yeah.
do not want it. And the only thing I'm mistaken on is that I thought I wanted something that I don't in fact want. So it's very interesting when you're confronted with the reality that you are in control of this, and then you watch yourself in real time say, no, I don't want to do it. So I think a lot of guys, maybe that tells us that they're actually they don't actually want what they think they want.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah, I agree with that.
Okay, cool. So there's a couple more things. I'm really really happy with what we've covered. We've covered actually more than I thought we were going to, and it's been always really good talking to you, man. Maybe just a couple of more all over the place things that I had down that I think are worth going over. We've gone a little bit into responsibility, so I think that most of that conversation was about taking responsibility for yourself, but the other one is maybe taking responsibility of something outside of yourself. What do you think about guys who are in this position, the catastrophizing, no autonomy, no control, no real direction in life, about taking responsibility for something, right? Like whether that be a family member, a niece or nephew that they can at least give some advice to, a child on the other end, other extreme, a dog or whatever. What do you think about the role of responsibility has to play in individual well-being?
I think that it does, and I've even seen this in like my own life that I think when you say responsibility, what more resonates with me, I guess it's a synonymous word, would be purpose. That it's like about having a purpose and feeling like you're making an impact to the world and you're contributing something, whether it's to someone or you have some sort of goal in mind. If you like have a purpose, I think it kind of relates to your question a little bit when you ask about responsibility. Like, because I've seen in my own life that if I say wake up first thing in the morning and I immediately bang out 2 hours of work without even getting distracted, then as soon as I've done that, even though in theory I should be feeling a little bit more stressed, a little bit more fatigued, a little
Mm.
bit, you know, out of energy, whatever you might say, I actually don't. I feel the opposite. I feel like, oh, I'm really glad that I did that. I feel like I'm making progress. I feel like I'm doing something. And, to tie this to some other guy's example who is in a rut and, he's one of these draconian guys who is just feeling terrible about his dating life at the moment. And, whether there's factors outside of his control, such as his, poor height that he was just dealt a bad hand with, or poor facial appearance, then, instead of just dwelling on that, because when I've just dwelled on things that I can't control and not focused on things that I can change, then I just, feel terrible. And I end up in this spiral where, like, if the first 2 hours of the day I just sit on my phone watching some dopamine YouTube videos. Then 2 hours turns into 3 hours, 3 hours turns into four, and suddenly
Mm.
I've wasted the whole day. And then I just feel awful about myself by the end of it, even though in theory I'm like, oh, I've relaxed, I should be feeling a bit better. So for bringing it back to the point, for these guys that are feeling really draconian about one aspect of their life, whether it's dating or whether it's anything, then just take a step back maybe from that aspect and think, okay, what else can I do to find purpose? What else can I take responsibility for and be making progress in that area of life? And I guarantee that they'll be feeling a lot better after making progress in those other departments if they focus on the thing that is bringing them the most sadness at that moment in their life.
Yeah, 100%. 100% agreed. It's interesting. I think one of the most epiphany causing passages of text or information I received over the last couple of years, I was reading Marcus Aurelius's Meditations, and it was absolutely not what I was expecting to get from the book. But there was the one part that stood out more than anything. He very rarely mentions his wife, Faustinia the younger, I think, but his wife, and he basically, it was all arranged marriages back then. And he said, I feel so blessed by the gods or something that I not only have a wife who has a moral compass, i.e., isn't misbehaving, but that I actually have a connection with. I'm massively paraphrasing, but he was basically like the leader of the Holy Roman Empire felt blessed by the gods that not only was his woman like not a complete misfit, not a complete reprobate, but he could actually talk to her about stuff as well. And I was
Mm,
like, and the problems that people think they're facing today, and this maybe comes back to how much value you put on things like beauty and a potential partner, because the leader of the Holy Roman Empire felt blessed by the gods that he got on well with his wife, right? The most powerful man in the world, by some estimations. So yeah, I think you're absolutely right in terms of taking responsibility for something. I think when a man has that responsibility, relating it to Marcus Aurelius being the leader of the Holy Roman Empire, he's not obsessing over these things anymore. He's looking at his incredible legacy and saying, "Wow, it's great that I've got a supportive person by my side as well." But when you've got none of that, you're thinking, why don't I have, this supermodel, this Victoria's Secrets model? Like, life is miserable because I can't get her. So I think that responsibility, in a sense, nullifies our misplaced prioritization of things like that. So maybe throw that to your end before we come to the final point.
Honestly, I've got nothing to respond to that. I just agree with it, and I don't think I can add any more.
Awesome, awesome. So finally, in our little conversation before we started recording, we brought up Tusk's cancellation, and yeah,
Oh
he's
yeah.
obviously he's a good friend of mine. We're very different people, but he's a very good friend of mine. And maybe just out of curiosity and maybe some viewers' curiosity, what are your thoughts on him being cancelled? What do you think it represents a risk to other content creators in this space? And was that the stimulus for you to create your second channel, Honest Waffles?
Just to answer the last question first, because it's really quick. I actually created that second channel like 8 or 9 months ago. Tusk only got cancelled, I think,
Right.
at the start of the month, didn't he? So it's been very short amount of time since that's happened. But because other creators got cancelled before him, I proactively created the second channel in order to foresee potential consequences because before that, all of my eggs were in one basket. I only had the main channel, and just as a business reason to diversify a little bit, that's why I created the second channel to protect myself to some degree. And to answer your other questions, I think it was totally unfair that he got cancelled. I didn't watch all of his content, but I watched quite a few videos from him, and he always seemed quite down to earth and modest, and he was genuinely trying to teach guys and point them in the right direction of life. I haven't seen all of his videos. I don't know if he said anything that broke the user terms because that's usually what makes a channel get terminated. However, I heard that his channel was deleted with no warnings and no um you know things that they outlined that he did wrong, which sounds extremely bizarre to me because that brings this theory up that is YouTube just clamping down on all pickup content, any guys who are actually trying to make a change in their dating life and approach women. Is YouTube just throwing a blanket ban out there and saying that isn't welcome on our platform anymore, which is very scary because that opens new doors to say, oh, if they ban this one aspect of men's dating, are they going to ban other areas that they don't seem suitable for no other logical reason other than they just don't like it? There's and there's like theories about the people that work in YouTube are all woke and they've got very sensitive feelings, and maybe they will clamp down on more people. I predicted this in a video that I released on the second channel only a few months ago that other creators later down the line will get cancelled. And the next rendition who supported that has been Tusk, unfortunately. And I hope that he's able to bounce back from it in some way.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I agree on all fronts. I don't have the full story. Even I don't have the full story on it, but it does certainly seem not. It doesn't seem fair from any first principle standpoint that
Hmm.
that kind of content can be banned at will. Um, Finally, just I'm aware of your time, but do you? I tend to think you have a very rational perspective and objective perspective, and not a conspiratorial perspective, but also not an acquiescence to centralized bureaucracy and powers either. Somewhere maybe in the middle. Do you think there is like some sort of cohesive motivation to take something like him down, or do you think it just comes down to the individual whims spontaneously of woke individuals at YouTube, let's say, for lack of better terminology. Like, do you think there is this kind of TATE esque like conspiracy going on? Or do you think that
Hmm.
it's more like on the individual level of just changes in the political tides?
If I'm honest, I am more leaning to the idea that, like, the conspiracy that they are trying to shut us down and they don't like us. And I've even found evidence that I'm going to make a video on the second channel, not too far into the future, that I've discovered not just my channel, but a bunch of other channels have been shadow banned in some way. Where if you're watching the video on a public network, so if you're anywhere outside of your own home and you're connected to a Wi-Fi source, then my videos don't come up. And there's other creators who that is the same for. And I've not been notified about that in any way, shape, or form. And that is the definition of shadow banning. So I absolutely think that they are doing it. And the very rare scenarios where somebody is cancelled, it happens, such as in the example of Tusk. I think that will only happen more often. But what I think that YouTube is more leaning towards, and not just YouTube, but all of the platforms, TikTok, they're all the same, that they will just shadow ban people because then it's very difficult to prove. It's very hard for a person, a content creator, to prove that they have been shadow banned. And I think it's grossly unfair and I think it's incredibly immoral because YouTube it essentially is a monopoly. Like, people think, oh, TikTok's a competitor of YouTube. No, it's not because they both have their monopoly on two different things. YouTube is about long form videos, videos that are 5 to 20 minutes long. TikTok is 30-second videos. So they are both their monopolies in their respective industries. Like, people say like Rumble, but Rumble it's a tiny, tiny platform compared to YouTube. We're talking not even 1% of the viewership. So YouTube is a monopoly. And it's incredibly unfair, in my opinion, that they have the power to pull the rug from literal businesses. These are lives that we're talking about here. Like James Tusk, this is going to dramatically impact his business. Or if my channel got deleted, that would dramatically impact my life and my income. So these are real people and real businesses that we're talking about. And I think it's incredibly unfair and immoral for this monopoly power to just sweep the rug from underneath anyone's feet without any warning, without any jurisdiction. It's just insane to me.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree with that. The only thing I would add is that it seems to be channels where people are actively putting in work and trying to do something good for society, right?
Mm,
Like it's the same across all of these, right? It's at least have some measurements by which you can say kids are being indoctrinated or performing worse in school because X creator, they don't even have any type of evidence or metrics by which to measure the supposed harm that this creator's having. And it seems to
it
be the
is.
proactive, intelligible creators that are actually creating like long form content or content with real value that are being targeted, and not the pranksters and like the random catchy clickbait nonsense that we see across these
Or
channels.
even worse is, and this shows that the overtone window is shifting in the direction of the wokest, is because on TikTok or any platform for that matter, less so on YouTube, but mainly TikTok and Instagram, you've got literal OF creators who are creating explicit videos, and these platforms know that there are kids, a large proportion of teenagers, kids between the age of 10 and 15 who are able to access these videos. And we've all seen these videos before because if you log on to TikTok, one in every two videos that comes along, if you're a guy, is going to be some OF creator with these thirst traps, throwing it in these teenagers' faces. And the reason that none of that's banned and none of that is getting clamped down upon by these platforms is because the overton window has shifted in the last decade to say, okay, self-improvement content, guys who are teaching stuff to young men who actually want to help them, that is now bad. That is, you might have a few bad apples, but because of these bad apples, now everyone's a bad apple and they're clamping down on us. Meanwhile, on the other side of the overton window, it was like female sexuality, female being able to express themselves and show more skin without repercussions, the Overton window has shifted over that department now, where it is completely okay and acceptable for these OF creators to show themselves in very revealing manners on platforms like TikTok and Instagram to teenage boys.
For sure. Yeah, I agree on the whole. For me, the jury's still out on whether it's all planned or whether it is just a sort of cause and effect of the change in tides in society. But for sure, it's really interesting. And yeah, there's no distance between us on those last few topics. Before we end this, man, yeah, I mean, I'll quickly give a shout out. I think actually the service you offer, at least the face rating, and particularly the looks maxing advice that you offer with that service, I think that's incredibly good. And I think actually, based on our conversation today, it's a good opportunity for guys to actually see if they're going to respond in the catastrophizing way or if they're going to respond in the proactive way, right? If a guy is thinking about it now and they go into that with the mentality of I'm going to get my face rating, get critical feedback just to test what side of that wall I land, whether I'm going to catastrophize or be proactive, I think it would actually be quite a good first principles experiment. So I believe that there's value in that. Maybe you could tell the guys where else they can find you,
Yeah.
any exciting projects coming in the future before we tie this up.
Yeah, thank you for the shout out for the main financial generator of my business and for your admiration of it as well. And to branch on from your other point, I think that you are right that there's two ways that guys will go down. They're either going to take the proactive approach or the draconian approach from what I put out because like I have these comments on my videos whenever I advertise face ratings, and these guys have been subscribed to me for like 2 years or 3 years, and they will say, I'm not buying a face rating or looks maxing because I already know that I'm ugly and it's over for me. I already know that I'm a 3 out of 10, a 4 out of 10, and I'm never going to have success. Well, how do you know that? How do you know that? How do you know? Because you're saying a lot of things in, that one statement. You're saying that your looks are incredibly bad, genetically speaking, which you haven't got 100% proof for. And you're also saying that there's nothing you can do. You can't looks max in order to increase your looks, which again, you don't 100% know either. So these guys, they're more than welcome to make that decision, but I think that they're almost shooting themselves in the foot because they've picked that draconian mindset and thinking that it's already over before actually finding out, then they are on a path to being more depressed and more sad and withering their life away, essentially.
Yeah, 100% agreed. So where do guys find that if they do want to check you out? And
Yeah.
yeah, anything in the future coming or
If they go to my main channel and it's a link in the description of any of my videos. Usually the first one. Sometimes it's a little bit further down, but I've got a website, ratebywaffles.com, and all of my services are listed there, 3 packages. It's pretty straightforward. And as for the future, it's more or less same as usual. I'm trying to get a new video on the main channel out once every 10 days or so. It's usually either a weekly upload or once every 2 weeks, depending on how much time and investment it takes to make it, or if I'm busy at the time. I'm just making more videos on the same topic to try and show that looks are extremely important as a guy if you're trying to date in the modern day.
for sure? Well, always a pleasure to talk to you, man. We always get into the first principles, into the philosophy and the politics of it all. So yeah, I appreciate you, man. Thanks for coming on. And I look
Yep,
forward to more
thanks
of
for
these
having me.
conversations. Take care, my
Yep,
man.
thanks for having me. Looking forward if there's any more you got planned in the future.
For sure. Bye.
Thank you.